This is the DAR Today podcast, and I'm your host, Brooke Bullmaster Stewart. Well, on the day this podcast is airing, April 14th, but back in 1865, an event happened that forever changed the course of our American history. President Lincoln was shot in the balcony of Ford's Theater. He was shot by actor John Wilkes Booth, who then cried out, "Sic semper tyrannis, the South is avenged." Lincoln then died the next day at age 56, the first U.S. president to be assassinated. And also coming up this month to commemorate and remember something that's much happier to think upon is the 250th anniversary of the Ride of Paul Revere. Now, I think most of us have heard the poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, but did you know that Longfellow's mother, Zilpah, was the daughter of a Revolutionary War hero? Well, as April is National Poetry Month, it would be neat to honor that poem by saying a bit of it today, just a bit of the very long poem. So in the interest of time, let's just say a few of those verses today. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere on the 18th of April in 75. Hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, "If the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light, one if by land and two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm, for the country folk to be up and to arm." Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride, booted and spurred with a heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse's side, now gazed upon the landscape far and near, then impetuous stamped the earth, and turned and tightened his saddle girth. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the old North Church. As it rose above the graves on the hill, lonely and spectral and somber and still, and lo, as he looks on the belfry's height, a glimmer and then a gleam of light, he springs to the saddle, the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes, till full in his sight a second lamp in the belfry burns. You know the rest in the books you've read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again, under the trees at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and load. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm, to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For born on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will awaken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. One thing we wanted to share with you today with regard to this, the Two Lights for Tomorrow initiative is a nationwide initiative to commence the celebration of our 250th birthday of the United States of America. The famous ride of Paul Revere, of course, occurred on the night of April 18th to 19th in 1775. Two Lights for Tomorrow originated out of a multi-state collaboration and uses imagery of that shining light 250 years ago as a uniting call to action today for our fellow citizens, no matter where they are, to commemorate and remind ourselves that our history is about working together for a better tomorrow. At its heart, it is a call across the country for two lights to be displayed either in private homes, businesses, state houses alike. Two lights to remind us all to come together for the good of our nation and for a more perfect union. Well, in today's episode, we want to honor our military. And so we will talk in a segment about the Military Women's Memorial, which is an ongoing effort that we support in the DAR, playing a few clips from the oral history that's been collected. Really interesting to listen to these women's stories. And then we'll have a segment about a soldier missing still since the Vietnam War and the family that mourns him. There are so many that still mourn. And then we'll have some segments about what chapters are doing to honor our military, such inspiring stories. So let's jump right in. We just ask that you subscribe to this podcast and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. And hey, thanks so much for being with us here today. As many of you know, DAR has been a steadfast supporter of the Military Women's Memorial since the creation of its foundation in 1985 and the dedication of the memorial in 1997. Our President General Pamela Wright recently shared with us that with a recent significant donation to the memorial's renovation efforts, the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution has now proudly provided cumulative donations totaling $1 million in support of the Military Women's Memorial since its inception. Located at the entrance to Arlington National Cemetery, the Military Women's Memorial, or MWM, is the nation's only major national memorial to honor all women who have defended the nation. The memorial ensures that future generations of girls and women are inspired to serve their country through military service. The memorial has been working to bring to life the many stories of servicewomen through programs and the renovation of the memorial's interior. As DAR members, we salute all the women who have served our nation's military since the Revolutionary War, and you're encouraged to explore the Military Women's Memorial Register, where any woman who has served in the U.S. Armed Forces can share her story and experiences in an interactive database. If you know a servicewoman or woman veteran, please take advantage of the free registration to ensure her story joins hundreds of thousands of individual stories that make up the register. You can check out, too, our National Defense Committee's webpage on our members' website to see how they are supporting Her Story, the group that is officially gathering these stories. We found two that we thought might interest you and would love to play just a few minutes of them for you now. First, you'll hear Major Corky Adcox, United States Air Force retired, born in 1945.
But I got stationed at March Air Force Base, and I took a train out of San Antonio. Nobody bothered to tell me that the world is not hot. And I'm taking a train across the desert, and it took overnight to get there. I froze. And I was just in my summer uniform. But one of the conductors came through and saw me shivering, and he took his jacket off and covered me up. And he says, I have to get off the train at midnight. But my address is in the pocket. Just give it to somebody, some of the other conductors, and I'll make sure I'll get it back. So here's this conductor that feels sorry for this dumb 18-year-old that's freezing to death on the train, and he gives me his jacket. And I wish I'd have kept that address and said how much it meant to me. Somebody noticed I was having problems and did what he could to take care of them. But I got to March, and my first assignment was a female med-surg ward. And for the first time in my life, I saw people sick and dying. And it was a very difficult thing for me to see. Working as a candy striper, all we were allowed to do was pass out water and mail. But I saw people die of cancer, and it was a really hard thing for an 18-year-old with no background to see. And there were no people around. The nurses were busy or didn't care to see that they had somebody there that was really scared out of her wits.
Now this is Yolanda Atkins, born in 1919. She served as a WAC. She tells a bit about being stationed in Italy.
And when we were in Camp Polk, Louisiana, I think that was the worst camp we were in because it was in such a bad mess. And when we left there, they called us the grandmothers of Camp Polk because we chopped down trees and dug ditches, and we really were into it. They were really preparing us to go overseas. Right. Well, the day finally came when we went overseas. I was here in the States about a year before we went overseas. And we left from Camp Patrick Henry, Virginia, but they didn't tell us where we were going because they said that they could not open our orders until we were halfway to our destination.
How did you feel hearing that?
Well, I'll tell you, we felt we didn't care where we were going, really. But we didn't really expect to get into where we went. I mean, most fighting was over in Africa. So that's why they sent us to Italy. Now, we were the first blacks to land after the invasion of Naples. And we were stationed at in the convent of the University of Naples. It's a beautiful place. But we were right near the port. And when we got there were so many, I should say we were right near the harbor. When we got there were so many sunken ships in the harbor that we couldn't get off our ship. We had to wait until they got planks and put them on top of these ships that were sunken so that we could get off our ship.
So as you stood on the ship looking towards your destination, describe how that looked.
It was a complete disaster area. Bombed out buildings. And of course, as soon as we got off the ship, there were some civilians around. And the sad part was the children. You wouldn't believe how many of them didn't have a place to live or food to eat. I can remember when we went to finally got to the convent. When we got to the front door, there was this little boy all huddled up in the doorway. I don't think he could have been more than 4 or 5 years old. Now, we were there in the dead of winter. And when we got there, all he was wearing, he had a little pair of short pants held up with a string. He had a blouse, plain white blouse like this. One sleeve was out, and the other one was a short sleeve. No hat, no gloves, no sweater, and no socks. He must have found an old man's shoe someplace, and he had that on one of his little feet. I tell you, it was enough to make you bawl. And he was all huddled up there. Of course, the minute he saw us, he ran away. But now this child couldn't have had a home because there were so many people left homeless with the bombings.
What a wonderful organization, so worthy of our time and efforts. We'll leave their website in the show notes. On it, you can find these oral histories, ways that you can volunteer or to donate. We can all do something, and I'm sure you feel as I do, so proud that the National Society, DAR, has made this a priority with regard to their support. In a recent article in the National Defender newsletter, there was an article by Master Sgt. Carolyn Sargent, U.S. Air Force Band of Flight, where she spoke about her uncle, and we wanted to share that with you now. To quote Mrs. Sargent, "I have been to the Vietnam Wall and the Traveling Wall many times through the years. I cannot describe how I feel when I visit the wall. The feeling starts when I see the wall from a distance. I enter the memorial and I walk slowly toward the middle. I stop at panel 8 East and I see Uncle Don's name in row 58. Many memories of him return. I remember when he played jump rope with me, the boat rides, and the dolls he gave me. It's almost as if he's there with me. Most surely my uncle is dead. The 58th anniversary of the day his plane exploded was the 17th of June, 2024. It doesn't seem that long ago. When I was a child, I imagined he was stranded on an island in the middle of the ocean. The grief, the questions, and the doubt are still there even after 58 years. Will he ever be returned home? We, his family, still wonder. Today, there are 2 people left in my family who remember Uncle Don. I remember him even though I was a child. My brother, who's a year and a half younger than me, has a few memories of him. My grandparents have passed. They died still waiting and hoping for the return of my uncle's remains. Before she died, my grandmother, who was very sick, asked me, 'Do you remember Donnie?' And I said, 'Yes, Grandma, I remember Uncle Don.' And she said, 'He's still alive, He's stranded on an island and no one can find him.' There are 1,244 Americans still missing in action from the Vietnam War. Each person had a life story, family, and friends. My uncle, Donald Seaworth, is just one of those who are still missing in action. Realistically, we know Uncle Don's remains may never be found. We'll continue to be optimistic, and we pray that his remains will be repatriated. We hope that someday he will be honored with a military funeral at Arlington National Cemetery. And finally, at long last, we hope and pray to hear a bugler play taps for our uncle, Lieutenant Junior Grade Donald Edwin Seaworth. For those who are struggling with a family member that is MIA, there are resources. Check out our National Defender, the March 2025 edition, for an informative article there entitled Resources for Locating Vietnam POW and MIA. Along with many DAR chapters around the world, Canada's Pacific Dogwood Chapter is an active commemorative partner of the United States of America Vietnam War Commemoration Program endorsed by NSDAR. One of the goals of the program is to honor veterans of the Vietnam War for their service and sacrifice. Working with the Canadian Vietnam Veterans Memorial Association, the Pacific Dogwood Chapter Daughters identified 13 Vietnam veterans who served with the U.S. Armed Forces and are buried in the province of British Columbia, Canada. Their chapter event began at the Forest Lawn Cemetery in Burnaby, BC, with the looming big city skyline as a backdrop. A piper played and the chaplain offered a prayer, followed by remarks where the regent, Nancy MacLean, spoke about the veterans' service and how they served in Vietnam. About 12,000 Canadians chose to serve with the U.S. forces during the Vietnam War. As Canada was not a participant in the war, these young soldiers crossed the border to volunteer, and some sacrificed their lives. And while the Vietnam Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. identifies the Americans who served and lost their lives, one of the speakers at the chapter event, a representative of the Canadian Vietnam Memorial Association, described the North Wall in Windsor, Ontario, that identifies Canadians who never lived to return from Vietnam. First Vice Regent Joy Mooney initiated and organized the event as well as the preliminary research on each veteran. Treasurer Amy Newman used her skills as a genealogist to identify and locate family members for 3 of the 4 veterans buried in Burnaby. All British Columbian veterans were honored, and members of 2 families made significant effort to be in attendance. One family included 5 brothers and sisters, and one terminally ill family member spoke about his brother while family and chapter members laid flowers and placed American and Canadian flags on the graves. While there are, of course, ways we can help bring attention and honor those who have served, the Betty Allen chapter in Massachusetts wanted to visually remember the men and women who have served their country by creating a lawn of valor with 100 U.S. flags waving on the front lawn of the historic Clap House. The beauty of this solemn tribute became apparent as the colorful flags fluttered gently in the breeze for the first time on the 11th of November, 2023. These flags stood as a dedicated homage to the extraordinary men and women whose steadfast courage and loyalty have shaped the ongoing narrative of our nation's tireless pursuit of freedom and justice. Members of the community have been invited to contribute, honoring a specific loved one, family, friend, or ancestor with a flag containing their name. Chapter Secretary Wendy Ann Campbell wrote all the names on cards attached to these flags. Each name is reverently read out loud by the daughters of the Betty Allen chapter. It has quickly grown to symbolize the strength and unity of all veterans, patriots, and the families who have supported them since the beginning of the nation. On the 10th of November 2024, the Betty Allen chapter hosted its 2nd annual Lawn of Valor with a ceremony expanding the outdoor ceremony with an open house. This event honored the service of veterans in a way that aligned with Veterans Day observations. The occasion blossomed into a celebration of the significant contributions made by exemplary citizens whose deeds were publicly acknowledged through the prestigious presentation of NSDAR medals. We leave you today with this quote by General George Patton. "It is foolish and wrong to mourn the men who died. Rather, we should thank God such men lived." Well, thanks for listening, and be well, dear friends. Let's celebrate the stars and stripes forever, and remember, with all of your ancestors behind you, you are the result of the love of thousands. Well, this podcast was written and produced by our incredible team of writers and editors, and we are, as always, so grateful for President General Pamela Edwards-Rouse Wright and Historian General Suzanne Heskey for their constant guidance, to Master Sgt. Carolyn Sargent, to Pacific Dogwood Chapter Regent Nancy McLean, and Donna Helm and Denise Goslin of the Betty Allen Chapter for being so generous with their time. The National Society Daughters of the American Revolution is a nonprofit, non-political, volunteer women's service organization dedicated to promoting patriotism, preserving American history, and securing America's future through better education for children. Members are all lineal descendants of those who supported the cause of independence in the Revolutionary War. For more information, please visit dar.org. This is the DAR Today podcast.